Welcome back. My name is Yana the Heretic, and this is my channel, The Unpopular Opinion Becoming Popular. Today I'm recounting the events that were occurring from March 1st to the 6th. This is another gate under the Godhead Mitra, the solar deity from the Rigvedas, the guardian of honesty, friendship, and covenants. This gate is the gate of doubt, gate 63, and the keynote is after completion. And this is all about the head center that is experiencing pressure that is doubt, the rushing to get rid of doubt, that like anxiety that a lot of us experience especially comes from this place. It doesn't have to obviously come from this place because the head center is supposed to be light and carefree and yearning to accomplish what's on the other side of that curiosity. And obviously we don't get to sip or lavish in curiosity for very long. It's a fleeting moment. You know, if we could just like stay in that place, that would be divine. But obviously we grow through the ages, and the things that we were curious about before we're not necessarily curious about anymore, and that's why there's another thing to experience. So during this gate we had some important events, especially for me. I'm so fortunate that Mitra was happening during the eclipse this year. We had our blood moon lunar eclipse on March 3rd, and it was really potent in the sign of Virgo. So we were attempting to really come into ourselves and see ourselves away from that like self-criticism, that deafening self-criticism. There's nothing else that exists but how I failed, or how imperfect this is, or why I can't put this data out because I'm not feeling like that spark within, instead of just like being like, hey, however this information comes out of me, it is potent and important, and that it is something that will attract the right minds, and it takes time to get those minds, those people to come into your field, because if things were just handed to you easily, how much would you value them, right? So it's about just releasing that self-criticism, showing up to the thing, not giving up, however it looks, you're present. And another reason why I feel Mitra was super valuable was because my relationship most likely would have not survived if this guardian of covenants wasn't layered into this macrocosm, of planetary energy. It was a very difficult time to accept, the things that I have been through. I had one of those traumatic downfall moments during the eclipse where I hit that low state of abandonment, and that was the thing that was going on. I would have just been seated in my doubt fully if I hadn't like realized the knowledge of all of this. as the years go by, more and more of it sets into stone of what this really means. I would have unapologetically created another void or scar on my heart if I didn't have this information, by ending my relationship and not opening up more, because relationships really teach you about how to communicate, how to respect, how to join trust, and how to use proper communication and being patient in that interaction, supporting your partner. I felt a lot of pressure during this time frame to resolve my relationship failures. Along with my brother enlisting into the Navy around this time, it was pretty fresh. I had this abandonment issue luring, closer and closer towards me, which, definitely put a lot of doubt for me into the ether, because a lot of my relationship and the way that it started, it was very difficult, and doubt has followed me even though I've tried to ignore it. I've done all these tools, I've tried to do all these projects. I am usually like this, this wasn't like any different from how I've been, but it just kept on creeping up. My relationship with my partner now, he left a woman he'd been with for 10 years, and it put a lot into perspective for me, because I've never been in a relationship more than 2 years. We're going 2.5 years strong at this point. So this is like my experience, my time that I've spent in one single relationship, and previously never believing that love could be possible for me, because I watched my parents' lives tear apart so painfully, so brutally, that I just didn't believe that people didn't cheat on each other. And I was polyamorous for 8 years, and realized how no matter how much I communicate, there's people that are still going to be hurt. There are things that have been very difficult to communicate, including like, hey, don't like fuck around all the time. That's like not what I expected in this type of relationship. So, and it ultimately didn't work out for me. I felt personally like I, being my Venus and Leo, need something that is consistent, that is stable. My upbringing really, really, showed this gleaming neon sign of abandonment. So I was trying to run away from things that were not necessarily serious, but things kept falling away, for me, and people didn't show up with, ultimate respect for me. They thought I was a damsel in distress, and that would ultimately make me want to leave and, just start over, and I'll show you, how great this is gonna be for me, and I'm not just some kid, and I'm not just some, damsel. So this plight into a new state I definitely was determined and devoted to my path, and I met my partner, and you know, it was really difficult to trust that I would be the one, you know, even though he uprooted his entire life for me and this big change, you know, that was tremendous. You know, he had never been with somebody who was spiritually inclined, you know, or somebody that believed in magic. And it was really tough to get each other on the same page, even though, like, this was the path. And that has been proven. So this abandonment really hit me because I had been telling, you know, people in my life that, yeah, I'll do better. You know, I won't, you know, be jealous, or I won't, you know, be so frantic and nervous and obsessive over, you know, the fact that I just feel personally not supported or alone. And I really had to sit with that. I really had to deal with, you know, my own feelings. And there was no time, you know, there was no, you know, we have working lives, and I realized that I wasn't practicing that aloneness, and I wasn't letting my partner necessarily practice that aloneness because we were so tight-knit that we never got to take space. And that's where the doubt really formed. It's like, you know, we have to process these emotions. We have to process our own moods and feelings. We have emotional gates in our definition. And I felt that throe of abandonment because my brother was leaving, and, you know, out of like spite, he said, well, we may not have time for each other. And that really sent me spiraling downwards and hitting all of those aspects. Well, I'm never gonna really like have family, and like who's actually there for me fully, and all this stuff came out. And, you know, I realized that my partner, you know, reacts. He has an Aries moon, and although it's not at 0 degrees, it's still, you know, very much not like me, which I have a Pisces moon that is directly on the opposite spectrum, the end and the beginning. And that's been really difficult for me all of my life. I've dealt with a lot of people with temperament and anger issues, and I've always been more neutral. So when we had misunderstandings, I felt like there was no patience. He doesn't have his emotional center defined. So, you know, whenever I had to confront him with the things that I was feeling, it was uncomfortable to the point where, you know, my emotions affected him to the point where he just had to turn them off and walk away or leave at a certain point. And that made me feel really alone because, you know, all those times that I would cry by myself and never have anyone to you know, cry to or express my sadness to or confide in anybody, that wasn't available. It was never available, you know. And I understand now how it works, you know, for people that are non-emotional. I understand my role as a 5-1 now. And, you know, I also have always enjoyed processing my emotions in nature alone. So being an emotional body, it's not easy to put a time frame on how my emotions are going to affect me, and that obviously kept rolling through throughout these months, this is why I have to like go back and recount all of these gates, because I was really not okay. I was really not in a good place, you know. And I had this fear, you know, this huge looming fear that I would get, you know, disrespected or somebody would cheat on me for a really long time, because I just didn't trust that real love can exist. And as a Venus, you know, Leo in Venus body, this, you know, my identity is, my Venus is in Leo. I'm really extravagant and bold and big, and I want to love deeply and be poetic about it. This like lack of that is something that had to be really communicated and expressed, and, you know, eventually adhered and harmonized, you know. But we've all fallen into those mistakes where, you know, we don't like having to tell people what we need, but that is the way that we're gonna get what we need. And of course, you know, there are these telepathic moments with my partner where he just knows what I need, you know. And that's the hardest thing. It's like, well, you know, there's this doubt is like happening, that is this the right person for me? You know, if they keep on walking away from me and shutting the door, you know, what's gonna happen? You know, because in my past, my ex had, you know, we had been on a trip to Canada and we were hitchhiking through Canada, and he kept getting calls from, you know, a younger woman that he had pursued in the past and had history with, and, you know, she happened to be in Canada in that same area, and I was like already having trouble with him because he also had anger issues, and, you know, I could never express my feelings without it being shut down. So, you know, he basically didn't like that I felt disrespected, and he eventually just got up and left me in the middle, you know, of meth country Chilliwack, Canada. And I didn't have any phone service. I was in a different country, right? So I sat there for 6 hours, just like in this like crazy nasty runoff sort of sandy fucking place. And, you know, all I had, you know, I picked myself up by the bootstraps at the end, and all I had was like a cardboard sign, some whiskey and dabs, and, you know, made my way back home. Made my way, you know, eventually back home. And, you know, that's the thing that happened. Like, I kept on attracting these partners that, you know, weren't there to support me because of my armor, because of my inability to open up my heart, to be able to share, you know, the things that I've been through, and to really like express myself and my needs. So even the frequency of me wasn't even hitting the mark. You know, I wasn't harmonizing with the people that were correct for me, even though it really seemed that way. So I thought this was happening again, you know. I thought, you know, oh, well, like, I'm attracting these, like, really terrible people that are just gonna leave me, that, you know, are not here to support or respect me. And every single time that somebody walks away from me during an argument, I automatically think that they're gonna just leave. You know, it just penetrated me so hard, it shot me back into those visions of like my ex leaving. You know, every time we would have an argument, no matter how simple it was, he would like go to a different state and yell at me over the phone, and, you know, it would be like, oh, you don't have access to me anymore. I'm just going to do whatever I want. End of story. And there was no explanations, nothing. There was no other chances. There was nothing. You know, same thing with my parents. Like, I came home one day, and just because I smoked pot, and my stepdad, you know, went through all my stuff in my closet and violated my privacy and found a pipe with a nug in it. You know, he changed the locks on the doors, and my mother let him, you know, and it's like, oh, here's your fucking life, you know, like, figure it out. And I had nowhere to go. So it's like, as soon as, like, I need something or I'm trying to express myself, I would get the door shut on me. And those are the abandonment issues. Those are some of the abandonment issues that I've experienced in my life. And, you know, it just kept happening. I just kept feeling that, and I kept feeding it as well. And, you know, this doubt really followed me up until, like, I broke it off. You know, I was like, I'm absolutely not going to be treated like this anymore. This person's not understanding my abandonment issues. He's walking away frustrated at me. But within that period of our break, you know, I didn't chase him. I didn't walk, you know, and try to resolve anything. And the thing that I was, like, preventing because of my own personal fear is actual space, which we both need as single definition humans, as well as me having gate 40 and him having other gates that would require aloneness, and for us to nourish ourselves in private, and to process emotions that have just been, like, extended for fucking way too long. So I let it ride. And you know what happened is he totally just, like, processed things and found out, like, where he was at, and reflected, and, like, we shared our epiphanies that had happened, you know, and our reflections that had happened, and how we're gonna move forward. And, you know, it didn't, you know, we didn't, like, come together right away. It took some time for us to actually see whether or not this was going to be possible for it to work. And I realized, you know, holy shit, like, my mindset, you know, from the very beginning in relationship is that I have to compete. I have to be something that's worthy. I have to, like, you know, constantly impress, or, you know, do something. And that really was my own self-doing, you know, at the beginning of a relationship where you don't get to know each other's sides, you know, and it's a lot more comfortable now. So yeah, people in my past have transformed simple discussions into abhorrent, you know, actions that they don't come back from. They just can't come back from, because it's so violent, it's so intense, you know. I'm really happy to overcome the level of death that I've experienced throughout my life, you know. I've definitely feel really content that I can express myself, and I'm glad to be able to share my experience with people, because no matter how I paint, you know, the issues that I've had of abandonment, a lot of people just don't know how to really feel it, you know, and rightly so. Like, if, you know, you don't have these type of issues, it's not really relevant. But a lot of us do, you know, so yeah. I'm really amazed at how much head pressure, has been relieved and is relieving, because that has been the source of my anxiety. It made me feel really immobile because I didn't allow other thoughts to come in, and my creativity to come in, at full force. If I'm constantly in a state of doubt and negativity, there is no way for me to succeed. That is turned inward on myself, because this doubt, where this gate really shines, is the doubt that happens when you have a theory, but you are checking off all the boxes of where is this going to actually work? How do I get to that next stage? This could be really positive if we let ourselves, use our mind for that curiosity, that state of, well, I have all these questions and I'm really determined to get them answered. And the skepticism is a part of somebody that has individuality, and they want to figure things out on their own. And that's very much my partner, and I am so grateful that I'm not just some guru that he's obsessed with. He has to figure things out on his own, even though I share my life, my path, my tools for betterment and awareness. He's not just oh yeah, glazing over or gullible. He's yeah, I want to know this from the angle that I'm studying it from, and from the books and suggestions that I want to research it from. And that makes me gratefully happy, because it can add more to my knowledge as well. Maybe I've overlooked something, or I don't have the same language for this specific thing, but here he comes in with his skepticism, and he can add and fill in the gaps where they need to be filled. So that is really the best place that this doubt can be used, is, to be craving the answers of life, to be asking questions, and more so, you find that there's more questions that need to be answered after you find one answer. It's a prism, education, knowledge, awareness. It is a prism. You don't really see all of the sides until you're at the very end, and then your curiosity is flooded in a different realm of your life, So together, me and my partner, we make up the right angle cross of consciousness, because to doubt, that means that you're conscious. You're not just passive. You're not just taking things in and chewing them up and, being yeah, that's solid. You're actually asking questions, and, you want to know things for yourself. You want to experiment. So I have gate 64, which is the gate of, I believe that one is the gate of confusion. And we both have these certain things in different ways, but we are conscious of them. You will always have to endure doubt You know, if you have this gate, you're always going to feel this pressure. If you have, you know, open ajna and open head, you know, and it can be fun. And just don't let it turn in onto yourself, you know, and start doubting yourself and limiting yourself and being, you know, oh, I can't do this in this amount of time, or this isn't possible for me this year, or blah, blah, blah. Like, there's people that say that all the time, but let it be open. Like, allow yourself to be open. You know, that doesn't mean that don't be realistic with your finances, or don't be realistic with yourself, or patient with yourself, but just don't say those things out loud. Perhaps don't say that you can't make this happen, because you're not allowing anything to come in that can give you an answer to how you are capable. So that was a lot of stuff to process. It is not easy telling people what's going on, but I am so grateful for the ability to. So the questions of the week are: how has doubt played a positive role in your search for truth? How has your doubt played a negative role in your life, or limited you to stay in stagnancy? Is it easy for you to be wrong about something, or do you fight it first? Or do you fight it altogether? When is defense healthy, and when is defense ugly? Is there someone in your family that will stubbornly say the simplistic thing over and over? Do you laugh it off, or do you search to be right at all costs? Note who you do this and the outcome. Note who you do this with and the outcome. So this is all about exploring how you react and where your doubt really lives, and how doubt can be healthy, how you feel complete and satisfied and satiated, and not trying to rush yourself. You're devoted. Just remember that the devotion is there for all the things that need to come into your field of reason, and just have fun with it. Be carefree in your mind. Allow things to float in and come out, you know, if you are open or undefined in the mind. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I will see you all for the Tiny Temple Mystic Bazaar this Sunday. If you choose to come by, it's at El Vortex in Seattle, and it'll be from noon to 5 p.m. I will put all of the details into the bio. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening and recounting these interesting yet deep states that we have been through within the last month. And I shall see you next time.